All right, we are live.
All right, fantastic, everyone. Welcome to Next Opportunity Social. You are here with Miss Rachele Wilson, myself, JuJuan Buford, and our esteemed guest, Miss Sharon Madison, one of Detroit's iconic and civic business leaders. We are so excited and privileged to have her here. I'm not going to steal her thunder, but Ms. Madison has accomplished some incredible things here in the business community and is a leader, building a phenomenal empire in architectural real estate development and construction engineering industries. She's occupied very important roles here in Detroit metropolitan area civically, and is definitely a person that's making an impact and in a position to make important decisions and lead others. Ms. Sharon Madison, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. You too.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, no, that's me. Sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
So, Ms. Madison, you know, we always begin these interviews with the most quintessential question for us. Why entrepreneurship? Why did you fall in love with entrepreneurship and business ownership?
Well, first of all, John, thank you and your entire team for having me here this morning. As I've told you multiple times since you asked me, I've been so excited about being here and being able to speak to entrepreneurs and just the Detroit and greater community regarding entrepreneurship, which is a real passion of mine. I guess, I've really not known anything else. I come from generations of entrepreneurs from both sides of my family. And so I've had a few jobs in my lifetime, but primarily when I was in high school and in college, and right out of college, I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency briefly. And the most, from that point on, I've pretty much worked for myself. So it's, so, I don't know anything else. I don't know how to do anything else. And that's just, who I am.
Okay. Now that's interesting, right? It was something I've thought about critically. And of course, Rachele and I have had this conversation time and time again, what it would be like to actually grow up in an environment with other entrepreneurs. It's usually just the opposite, right? You're kind of like the oddball out and everyone's looking at you sideways. Like, have you lost your mind? What do you mean you quit that good paying job? What are you doing? Go to school, make good grades, go out and take the traditional approach. But to be in an environment where entrepreneurship was just kind of lifestyle, right? How did that, I guess, shape or inform your own self-concept and who you could be and what you wanted to do with your life?
Well, I think one of the effects that it's had on me personally is that I really don't think about the kinds of things that, some of my friends do, in terms of, as an entrepreneur, it is not a secure way of being. Yeah. And so, I know that my parents and the whole entire household really has to be involved in it. Even, with my father, who was an engineer, and his father was an engineer. And my father was in business with his brothers for many years, and then with me. And so what I understood, is that, you work all the time. even when you're on vacation, you're not really on vacation. So, we generally, when we went on vacations, we were generally going to a job site somewhere, so, it really was always, whether or not it was New York or Jamaica, we were going to see some business associates, a project or something. So, that is what I grew up with. And so it's a 24/7 type of scenario. I don't know that that's necessarily good, but that I knew, it was hard work, sacrifice. You have to make choices. And so but in my family, which basically had the entrepreneurship vision and ethic and working, also was very much engaged in social justice. So I tell a story that I learned about my dad. actually when he died, was that, in the early 60s, they were trying to integrate the schools of Cleveland, Ohio, as well as having opportunities for Black businesses with the Cleveland Public Schools. And my father and his brothers had just gotten their first job as architects and engineers. When I say first job, the first time a Black firm had been hired by the Cleveland Public Schools to design a school. And, but yet daily there were demonstrations on the integration of schools and the equity in the school system, of which my mother was very active on picket lines every day. And my father was there as well. And he would picket during the day and do the drawings at night. So, so to make sure, so there was always this duality in my family that, again, we have to do the things that are necessary in order to advance the business. But at the same time, you do not forget what your responsibilities are as citizens in a society. And so that's really kind of been my guidance through the years. My mother, who was on those picket lines, eventually became the president of that school board, and had a lot to do with making sure that African Americans were doing business with the school district, and that there was some equity in terms of the education of children.
I love it. So I'm listening to you and I'm hearing this duality, right, of both purpose and mission, right? Oftentimes individuals start up businesses, and let's be frank, I mean, they have a passion, or they have a skill, or they have some type of acumen, and they want to take it to the world and earn money doing it. But when I speak with entrepreneurs of your generation, it wasn't just about earning money. The business was almost like an expression of purpose, right? There was an underlying achievement there. So for me, it's fascinating to hear you articulate it. But I have another question, right? 'Cause I've thought about this as I've built businesses and I've worked with others who have, and whether or not you felt any type of pressure or stress because of expectations that may have been set as a result of the nature of the work that your family was doing and the legacy that you ultimately inherited. And of course, I'm really excited to share. And the more I learned about you, I said, you just inherited, you grew it. It wasn't like you were born on second base and you stayed there, right?
Yes.
If you don't mind, elaborate a little bit about that and
Well,
what that means to you.
Yes, that's an interesting thing. For me personally, yes, I have a strong sense of my family's legacy, but also the legacy of all African Americans that have been who have attempted to be in these fields and were not successful in it. Or in addition to that, young people that are looking for and needing some individual, some image that they can point to in order to know that they can do it too. So for me, it was very, obviously, I'm a third generation in this business on my mother's side of the family, which is also very interesting. So my grandfather, Robert James Madison, was one of the first Black engineers in the country, and just faced discrimination at every point.
Yes.
When he moved, so he could not get a job as an engineer. And that was probably one of the motivating reasons for being in business was, you couldn't get a job. So when he was so after he graduated from Howard and unable to get a job, he then taught mathematics and coached football teams at HBCUs around the country. And then my dad was, so each one, he had 4 sons, each one of them was born in a different location at a different school. So my dad was born in Selma, Alabama, when he was teaching at Selma University. And he was the first Black engineer to be hired by the Defense Department during the war. And of course, right after the war, he was fired because he was Black. And so they moved to Cleveland, Ohio. He took the civil service exam, and he scored #1 in that exam. And yet they would not make him, put him in the engineering department. They made him a foreman of dirt streets in the city of Cleveland, which was the highest position a Black person had held up to that point. So, he was always, I understand he was brilliant because he died before I was born. And my dad said, he died of a broken heart because he was not able to fulfill his dream. And so part of what drives me is knowing what my grandfather was unable to do. And by laying that groundwork for me and my siblings and my cousins and many, many others who are not in my family, I feel it was my obligation and responsibility to continue on because he could not. And then, of course, I run into young people who have never seen anybody that looks like me in this profession. And it's important for them to see that it is possible. So that's part of the legacy issue with respect to that.
Okay. All right. So before I had the opportunity to get acquainted with you, and before I did the deep dive, right, I would walk by the Madison Building, and I heard rumors that an ebony complected family owned that building, right? And then one day I walked in and I saw the portraits on the wall. And I said to myself, my God, this is like history I'm walking in. And to be transparent with you, the next question that came to my mind is, how did they do it, right? They're downtown Detroit, owning some of the most valuable real estate in the United States, quietly going about building their business. And I'm hearing about all these other challenges business owners have had downtown. I'm hearing about all of it. I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And here you are quietly building wealth and a legacy right in the heart of downtown. And I guess one of the questions I would pose to you is, what's been the difference? How have you been able to fare and do well and excel in this industry when other people have made the same attempt and quite frankly fell flat on their face?
Well, that's an interesting question. You always ask interesting questions. I thoroughly believe that anyone can do just about anything if you believe it, if you just go for it. So when this building, I'll tell you how it came about. My dad said to me one day, we had several offices around the United States, primarily where we were doing architecture, engineering primarily, and in some instances, program and construction management. And I was in the Detroit office, and my dad said to me, Sharon, we need a building. Go find us a building. So, I started scouring around Detroit, and okay, fine. So, and I narrowed it down to 3. And the one on Washington Boulevard, there were some that looked better, in terms of what they were now. That were, it's a beautiful building, as you know. So there's, there's not an issue, but there's, they were more modern, et cetera, et cetera. But kind of looked at this building and said, yeah, this is the one. And so I started talking to, it was owned by a Mr. Schumacher. There was a furniture store there at the time, Gardner Schumacher. So I just started talking to Mr. Schumacher. And so, these conversations went on with him for, about a year. And then he said, well, Sharon, I'm ready to sell the building. And so, but we didn't have the money to buy the building. And, and one of the interesting things that continues even today is that banks weren't really lending to people like us in Detroit for any purchase. So I was able to work out a deal with Mr. Schumacher that, we put a deposit down. And then, I went to the city of Detroit, and I was able to get a loan from the DDA thanks to Coleman Young and Emmett Moulton, who is, an icon in his own right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, we were able to, we were able to come up with probably about 10 or 15% and at the time, and then, the rest was a loan from the DDA. So, and I kept, and so the thing is that when you, and what I found, I purchased a property in New York City in Harlem the same way. And what I would just say to people is this, that if it's in your mind, there is always a way to achieve it if you just keep going.
Yes.
And don't let people say no to you. So we have gone through very difficult times, with the property. Bought this property in the 1980s. Detroit's downtown was not strong. Banks were not lending to Black people for any kind of major project, even for financing, unless you were, had a multi-million-dollar contract with General Motors. Just wasn't happening. And so, but because somebody tells you no, doesn't mean that it's not gonna, that you can't do it. So I remember the first time that I got a bank loan, because my father and my uncles never were able to get a bank loan. They always had to bootstrap, which was always, leaves you financially desperate, which I also understood growing up. So I remember I needed to get a loan for the business, and I must have gone to 10 banks, right? And I was always told no. You show the contracts that you have. Couldn't get a working capital loan. So I remember one day I had a meeting with one bank that was a Black bank officer at this bank, and he came to my office, and I started out the meeting all wrong. I just said, I know you're not. He says, well, what do you need? I said, well, I don't know why I'm doing this, because I know you're not going to give this to me anyway. He said, I know you're going to turn me down. That's how I started out. Yeah. But I said, but this is what I'm looking at. He says, well, is this what you need? And I said, no. But, I don't expect that but I've been told that, I can't get any more than this. So, this is what I mean. He says, well, what would you need? So I told him. And, and then, we talked some more, and then he left my office. And a week later, he told me I'd been approved. And it was, it was quite an experience for me in learning is that you can be turned down a half a dozen times. You can be turned down a dozen times, but, you only have to they only have to say yes one time. So, so you just have to keep going for the yes. Every time somebody says no, you said, okay, that one down, I'm getting closer to the yes, because there is a yes, but it just is about how much you're willing to persevere and stay the course. And, it's my belief that if we do that, then we can achieve anything.
You kind of touched on it.
I love it.
When you purchased the building, you briefly stated that it wasn't a great time for downtown. It wasn't thriving down there. I'm wondering if you could touch on some of the challenges that you've experienced with owning real estate downtown and riding these waves of where downtown came and went, and now it's here and changing into.
Okay, so, this is where the rubber really meets the road, and where the truth hurts, but the truth is the light. Okay, so when we purchased the building, now, those of you that haven't been in Detroit very long probably don't even remember this, but when we purchased the building, the Book Cadillac Hotel was open, and then it closed for 20 years. Okay, So when we moved on Washington Boulevard, we purchased the building. The book catalog probably closed maybe 2 years later. Actually, my father died about a year after we purchased the building. So I'm here at this building, and then there was a hotel where the new development that's going up, residential development that's going up on Grand Circus Park, there was a Statler Hotel building there. That was empty. There was, matter of fact, just about everything on Washington Boulevard emptied out. The book building was still going, but then it closed. So, and my accountants and attorneys are saying to me, Sharon, you need to sell this building. And I'm saying, well, and maybe if I could have, maybe I would have, but nobody would probably wanted the building. So, so I realized, that I had to make it work, and I had to also make the area work. And it was beyond me. It was beyond my property. So I started assembling all the businesses and property owners on Washington Boulevard to form a Washington Boulevard Association. So we focused on trying to make the area better. I can say that years later, one of our efforts, which was really, really important, was the opening up of the boulevard, because it had been closed off as a pedestrian walkway, and therefore any kind of retail or business on my side of the street could not have really developed, because you couldn't see it, you couldn't get up to it. So we wanted it to be restored to a boulevard, which is what its original design was. And that took place maybe about 12 years ago. But, and when the book Cadillac, then the book Cadillac could thrive. Then we have now what is the Aloft Hotel. I mean, none of that stuff would have been able to where the art gallery is. I mean, they just could not have taken place if the street had been closed off. So, that was one of our efforts. And, in almost everything that I've done, I've realized that it's not just about me. I guess I could go back to the social justice scenario, but even from an economic point of view, that, the collective is much stronger than the individual if you're small. And so we must, we have to band together.
So you said a couple things that caught my attention. I know something that I definitely want to revisit with you, that I know a lot of business owners listening to this are thinking, is how do you even go about the process of preparing yourself and putting yourself in position to acquire the type required to acquire real estate, right? A building in downtown area. I know we don't have time to do a deep dive into that, but that's definitely something I'm going to look to revisit with you at some point. But the other, right? People oftentimes ignore, I guess, politics that are required, the relationship building that's required. I mean, I have to believe it took some doing to get the individuals who could make the decision to return it to a boulevard. It's not like they woke up one day and said, this is the right thing to do, we're going to do it. So I know there had to be some type of pressure. There had to have been some type of a lot of different things to make that happen. What did that process look like?
Well, I am a urban planner by profession. And I remember when I was a student at the University of Michigan, one of my professors said to me, or not just to me individually, but to our class, well, it's important as a planner to be a long-term planner, because, we develop these plans, but it takes years for plans to actually become a reality. And so, you have to have some patience in it. I started this process during the Archer administration. And it really, and it wasn't until Kilpatrick that people started to really pay attention to the need for the development of the boulevard. So it's it did not happen overnight. But I think as others started to recognize the potential of the city, is, we gave them a whole plan. I mean, I planners and architects, so, we said, okay, let's just draw up the plan,
Yeah.
and, in terms of what it should be. And then I did a lot of research in terms of the historical context and the historical design. So even you'll notice that on Washington Boulevard, the street lights are a little different from the other streets and lights in downtown. Those are historic lights, replicas of what they were originally. So, it's sort of been you just have to start where you are. On your other question in terms of, how do you build it up? Well, you look at what the resources you have and you use them. They're not always money. I have always, developed, I have very strong relationships, which I've developed over the years. And even when we first started here, just trying to get a prime contract with the city of Detroit, which unfortunately I'm not sure how they're doing these days, but back then it was very, there weren't any Black folks that were getting prime contracts with the city of Detroit. And I used to go to every event that Coleman Young was present and give him a letter, because it was difficult to get an appointment. I'd give him a letter every time. Mr. Mayor, I'd love to talk to you. Maybe after about the 10th letter that he got a call from his office and to schedule an appointment. And my dad and I went to meet with him, and that changed everything, being able to talk to him. And, he probably, his legacy in terms of what he's done for the city of Detroit, people really need to understand, because in today's scenario where we're looking at the police abuses and brutalities, you notice that Detroit Police Department really doesn't have the same issues that a lot of these police departments have. And that was largely because of Coleman Young, when he became mayor, insisting that the police department look like the citizens of the city of Detroit. And he had, and it went all the way through court. I don't know how familiar you are with it, with the, but the result of it was that it was mandated by the courts that it reflect the citizens. And so I think that whether, so obviously, and there's always, bad apples in any situation that you're in, but I think Detroit can be really proud that, we're decisively different than a lot of these police departments. And that's because of the politics, and people insisting. And, and I think he did the same thing for Black businesses as well.
So I'm hearing two things that I would anticipate. We all know hard work is the common denominator of success. We all know having a heartbeat to serve and help others and be a part of a broader mission buys you a lot of friends and affinity relationships, and people respect and admire you. But those two things alone don't guarantee success, right? And I believe there are habits that people have to inculcate in themselves and make sure they're surrounded by people with certain habits as well in order to achieve certain things. What are the habits that have served you the most? What are the habits that you've inculcated over the course of time that you can point to and say, these things are what have helped me achieve and continue to grow and prosper?
Well, first and foremost, you do need to know your business. You do need to know what you're doing and have the skill sets that are necessary, and you have to believe in yourself. A lot of the fundamentals of business, I think anybody can get from a business school. Although for entrepreneurs, they don't always hold up. But in terms of making sure that, that everything they tell you, try to find the best people that you can find to work with you. Look for mentors. I had a tremendous mentor in my dad. I had a tremendous mentor in my mother. But then I also had other mentors, people that I looked to and respected and admired. The first woman president of the city council, Irma Henderson, who really helped me find my voice. When I was younger, I probably was not as confident and one of the things that she used to always tell me was that, well, Sharon, when you go into a room, let them know who you are. And she would say that to me, and she would, almost every time that I saw her, and she meant that literally, but also just in terms of just who you are inside. So, I took that with me. There are just so many people that I've respected and have admired and have had the opportunity to talk with. And that's really important. You need to seek people out that you respect, admire, and are doing some of the things that you want them to do. And I think that lots of times people, especially young people, are afraid to approach folks, or for some reason, I won't say if it's not fear, it's something, but don't. And the reality of it is that most people do want to share if asked. And I think that it's important to try to gather as much information as you can and then make your own decisions.
So something I've always appreciated about our interactions is you're always so down to earth. Like, I can imagine us having this conversation at a coffee shop, at a restaurant, walking on Belle Isle. I mean, just laid back. And you're willing to take down the veneer, right? And you said something earlier that caught my attention. And that was, there were times in the family where despite maybe how things may appear on the outside, there were skinny periods, right? There were periods where things weren't necessarily right, where things weren't necessarily going the way we would like them to go. And you've kind of touched on that a couple times. Mm-hmm. So something that we always want to make sure, one particular question we want to make sure gets answered is, people have these ideals, these fanciful visions of what entrepreneurship is, right? And all the accoutrements associated with it. That's what we call it, with the reward of entrepreneurship, but as opposed to the work and the struggle and the triumphs and the challenges, all that fun stuff. What are some things that you would like to share with our listening audience who are considering entrepreneurship, that you want them to know that, look, let's get rid of these perceived notions that may not be true. Let's address these things right here. What are some of those things you want people to know about what it is to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think a lot of people think that, I don't know if your audience is familiar with the e-business books. Yeah. But, so they start out with, okay, well, I love to bake, so I'm going to open a bakery. Mm-hmm. And then, and people come in to buy my baked goods, but, now I'm having trouble with my employees. I can't keep the bakers, and I can't, my here comes the IRS, because I haven't filed the proper scenarios. Oh, my cash flow is bad, so I can't meet my payroll, all these kind of things. And so I think one of the things is really important for an entrepreneur is to understand is that, as they say in the e-books, you have to work on the business, not in the business. And the quicker you can get out of that, the better off you're going to be, because now you can see the bigger picture and you can see, the paths that you have to take. So I think that, one of the biggest things that people think is, well, I'm really great at this, the skill that I have, and therefore, I should be able to be in business and be really successful. But, there is the reality of your partner, whether or not you have one or not, and that's Uncle Sam. And they will come to get you, and I've had that experience, being behind on taxes and trying to, you don't have sufficient cash flow. So, you're paying this one in order to be, primarily your employees, or, because you have to keep them going, and this falls behind or that falls behind, and therefore you're, and now you've got a problem. But what I'm here to say is, again, to take advantage of the expertise that's around you. And so, I had a very serious tax problem. And I was fortunate enough to find some folks that could really help me, accountants, tax attorney, but not just anybody, because there are people that purport to know this. So, you have to ask around, and part of it is, I need to be able to feel confident enough in myself that I can go and talk to you and say, I've got this problem. Can you help me find somebody that can help me if I don't know that person directly? So and so through the years, I've been at different points in time where I've struggled probably longer than I needed to, because I didn't have the expertise to be able to make it through that. So, it's really important to look for those people that are tried and true, and they are out there. And I've had so many different experiences in lots of different ways that I can attest to that, is that you just keep seeking it. And again, you have to talk to people, and you have to be willing to say, I've got a problem. Because so many people, when they're in business, they feel like, oh, I've got to put this facade on, I got the right clothes on, I'm driving the right car, I've fixed my office up or whatever at the right location. And yet, there's barely, they're struggling to make it from day to day. And part of it is that you have to, at a certain point, once you've gotten your business plan, the business plan is very important, and I can tell you that, when you have one and you follow it, and sometimes you don't even know that you're following it, you write it down. That's what I say, it's got to be written. There's something magical about things being written down. I remember one time I had set some goals for Madison, my engineering company, and my head of human resources came to me one day, and she had found out, this like 2-page thing that I had written about where I wanted, the goals that I wanted to have for the company, which had been written maybe about 7 or 8 years before, and I had exceeded every single one of them. I didn't look at it again after I wrote it down, but there's something magical about writing it down. And that's just about in anything. It's part of the visioning process. So, but you have to surround. People say this all the time, and surrounding yourself with people. But you have to do that, and part of it is looking for those folks that you see that are successful, and asking them, well, I've got this problem. Have you ever had this problem before? Can you tell me what to do? One person, after my, there were several people for me, whether or not it was, who's now deceased, Mr. Benny Benjamin or Clyde Hopkins, who were engineers in the water department. And, I had a technical issue or had something, I would talk to them about it, and they would give me advice on it. I remember when I had trouble with the building, and I'll share that with you, because that hasn't been a cakewalk. That I called Bill Picard, and I told him what he said. Sharon, now Bill Picard has way more money than I have, and but he said, you wouldn't believe the kind of things that I've been through. He said, everybody goes through this. And so I think the other thing the entrepreneurs need to understand also is that sometimes we think that we are alone, that this has only happened to me, that I'm going through this struggle, when it's just part of business. The question is not that you're going to face the problem, you're going to have the problem. And once you solve one problem, there's going to be another problem. That's just the nature of the beast. But each time you go through something, your muscle is built up stronger to deal with the next issue, and is always preparing you for what that big situation is to take you through it. And I mean, if you look at it, I mean, look, what's his name over at Facebook? You know, I try to forget him because of just, you know, I don't like what they're doing, but over at Facebook, Zuckerman, yeah, you know, I mean, you know, look, you know, he has tremendous legal problems now, you know, or and all kinds of public perception problems. I mean, it is not one thing, it's another. There's always something that's there that can take you down. And in 2008, some of the biggest corporations in the world in investment banking collapsed. Yep. And so, you know, it's not an issue of the individual's ability or worth. Sometimes it's just the nature of the business. But if you seek those that have been through the war, you know, I've always, you know, they can help you, help you fight your battles and get through it. So it's a very important piece. I love it.
No, you answered actually about 3 or 4 different questions I had going on. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on that a little more with present day, with what we're going through right now and the pandemic. And, you know, I'm curious to see what you've done to pivot, what you've done to adjust. How have you relied on that community support, and what advice would you give to others who might be feeling, I know a lot of people feel, yes, we're all experiencing this together, but we're experiencing it in different ways. And I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs that feel like alone or failing right now, that may not be aware of how they can rely on their community and come to their community, especially here. So I'm curious to just know your perspective on, you know, what have you pivoted? What have you done during this time? And what advice would you have for someone who's feeling a little helpless with it from a business standpoint?
Yeah, you know, this is a very tough situation that people are going through right now, and I don't want to by any means downplay it. But I do think also this time is a real opportunity for everyone, you know, individuals and businesses alike. And so one of the things that I was really surprised, I mean, so I started calling people when, you know, it became clear that, you know, to see how they were, but also to see that they were taking advantage of what was being offered. And to my real surprise, so many, and particularly African-American businesses, did not even apply for PPP. Did not even apply for the emergency disaster loan program the SBA passed. And, you know, the reality of it is that those things were unprecedented. I mean, you know, the fact of the matter is that when there's trouble in the water and there's trouble that's going on, you know, the government has never really come to, you know, assist on any level for small business before. And yet so many didn't. And some of the rationale was, well, or what I was told was, well, you know, I don't want to take out another loan. I don't want to, you know, but the paperwork was so, you know, usually it's a paperwork issue, but in this case, I mean, it was practically nothing. And the reality of it is, we're on PPP, even if it didn't become a grant, it would be converted to a 1% loan of 30-year amortization. I mean, you know, that's like free. And the EIDL, 3.75, 30-year amortization, don't make payments for a year. I mean, that's like free money. You can't get money like that. And so it's when, you know, and so I find that we don't always take advantage or even attempt to take advantage of everything that's available. Now, having said that, so, you know, so that's one thing. It's not chastising anybody, but I'm just saying, look, there's still money out there. I heard there's still hundreds of billions of dollars still left in PPP. EIDL was cut off for anybody that wasn't in agriculture. So if you're in the agricultural business, but that was a very, very good program, and people should pay attention just in case it opens up to other types of businesses again. But you have to fortify yourself as strongly as you can so you can fight another day. So anything that becomes available, and if you don't know, again, that's where it's important to have that network of calling people and going to organizations that do keep on top of these things so that you are able to take advantage of what's out there. But I do recognize that there's some businesses that are hit much, much harder than others. Mm-hmm. And so this is the only thing that I can really say. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not I'm not this deep economist that can come up with some magical anything. But what I can say is that there are times when you struggle. There are times when it seems like failure. But all those things are really important to your growth on the longer haul, and to test you to find out how really committed you are to what you're doing. Sometimes things will occur that helps us open our eyes to new opportunities. And as a result of this pandemic, I can see that there are going to be some tremendous opportunities. And I think unprecedented opportunities for those that have been ignored in underserved communities and in populations that are non-white male. Mm-hmm. So I think that what we have to do is that, okay, after we take our, after we, take our lap of, everybody has to have a moment where, you have a moment of depression or feeling sorry for yourself, but only make it a moment. I have those too. I still have them now, but I'd only try to make it a moment because I recognize that my history, looking back on things and looking at all the things that have occurred that could have knocked you down, wiped you out at any given point. But as long as you're willing to stay the course, get back up, be confident and know that you can do it. The whole things that made you an entrepreneur in the first place. Why did you want to do it in the first place? You had an idea or something that was going to serve people. I mean, that's really, that was going to allow you to make a fair profit and to employ people. That's, to me, that's what I was taught to, the reasons why I want to have a business. And so, you go back to why you started in the first place and said, okay, all right, this is this. Now, what do I need to do? And I can guarantee you, if you sit back and meditate for a minute, thoughts will start coming and you write it down. And then you start, looking at how to achieve it and then looking for perhaps other people that can help you get there. But there are sources, there are resources. I mean, we are in unprecedented, but look, this pandemic, this situation that we're in is probably going to be one of the shortest periods. I mean, it's devastating. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's one of the shortest periods possible when we will be coming back. We've already started seeing, there's a lot of pent up demand. People, there's a lot of pent up demand. So it will come back. Look at, your politicians and tell them what you need. I mean, I think, because these governmental entities, local, state, and federal, need to know what you need. Okay, we know what, maybe they know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. You can, after you tell them what the situation is, okay, but understand what you need in order to survive and look for that. Because I can guarantee you somewhere, it's that, that number 12 out of the 11 tries. It's out there. You just have to keep going.
You touched on something earlier that I've been thinking a lot about. Of course, I believe the same, right? We know most of the iconic brands and names that we know that have been successful in business that were born during economic downturns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that there are tremendous opportunities that are going to present themselves. But what I'm also cognizant of is I remember 2008. And now I'm glad for 2008 because when this happened, it was like, okay, I've been here.
That's right.
I know what I can do, right? So yes, I believe in challenges building that muscle, right? Because, you know, it was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I've seen this before. But I'm also acutely aware of the fact that there was a lot of wealth in the African-American community that was just absolutely eviscerated in 2008, right? I remember many of my clients literally leaving their keys on the porches, walking away from commercial and personal residences alike. And now, of course, my biggest concern is I'm looking at other iconic businesses or individuals who have at least been mainstays in our community who I know are going belly up right now. I know there are going to be a lot of business owners that they've become part of the fabric of the community. They're just not going to be there. And so I don't make light of that. And I think about that, right? Especially when I think about the African-American community. And, you know, for the longest here in Detroit Metro, that's what it was. We owned real estate. We had our hands in terms of business opportunities. And that's what made Detroit special, right? But what I'm looking at is now you're going to have a lot of individuals who are no longer homeowners, which I know is impacting the community. And now I'm looking at all these small business owners who are getting ready to go belly up if they haven't already. And I know you don't have the magic wand, right? It's not a wizard, if you will. But let's say you were. Let's say you were the genie in the bottle. And you could, I guess, suggest, recommend, what are 3 things that you would like to see happen to help individuals transition during this period? But I'm sick and tired of talking about surviving. I've had enough of that. You know, where can we get to a point? What's the advice you would dispense for people to thrive, right? What are the 3 things you feel like need to be put in place, whether it be from the nonprofit, for-profit, government, whatever the case may be? What are the 3 things, if you could just snap your fingers and it was made available to the small business community, what would those things be?
So, John, what you point to, from my perspective, is really the fragility of our businesses in the first place, and the fragility of our community, how fragile everything is, that 2 or 3 months, you know, could take someone out of business and lose their house.
Yes.
And so the issue for us, I mean, I think, you know, this was also pointed out in 2008 as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in that instance, we saw where it was actually part of a plan, you know, where, you know, there was predatory issues that, you know, that put, again, people in a position where they thought, you know, you think you're someplace, but you're not really. So what we have to do in our community, in my belief, is to build a stronger foundation that can withstand these things that happen. I mean, there's some things that you know, we have no control over. I mean, this pandemic was one of them. I mean, you see not just, I mean, you see major businesses, you know, my friends will be very disappointed to, you know, when you saw that Barney's and Neiman Marcus, you know, Barney's is no longer, Neiman Marcus is filed for bankruptcy, and, you know, Saks is probably right behind it. I mean, there are so many of the higher end retailers that are no more. But, you know, I have known this to occur, you know, when you live long enough, you see this. You know that, you know, in Paradise Valley, Black Bottom, you know, our businesses have been decimated, whether it's not because of the need to run freeways through the middle of our communities in order to make it convenient for folk to get to the suburbs so they can bypass us and in the process destroy what has been built over generations, et cetera. So it is a tricky scenario, but what I would like to see now that we're in this next cycle, a cycle that has been less than 20 years from the last one in 2008, where so much was lost. We have to build the foundation. We have to strengthen the foundation in order to ensure that there is, as they recommend, which most of us don't have 6 months worth of cash in order to be able to survive, because this is not, this particular scenario is not going to last forever. And anybody that can stay afloat will. I thought what the federal government did, thanks to the House of Representatives, in terms of ensuring that there were dollars there for small businesses, et cetera, we have to take advantage of those things. We have to apply for them and understand them, and have sources like your show, as a source for people to find out about them, and then we have to act on them. But if I had a magic wand, I would, I don't know, they wouldn't give me one. But but the first, is to create real economic stability in our community, and then to bring back the whole notion of superior education, which is what Detroit had, and was quipped away. The fact right now that the city of Detroit has what was the Detroit Public Schools, and whatever they're calling it now, was basically raped by the state of Michigan and contractors when they did all these takeovers, took all the money. And what did that do? Okay, that destroyed the education, put the several nails in the coffin, and buried it at the bottom of the ocean with anchors for years to come. And the Detroit Public Schools is still paying that. Then, my wand would say, there is no debt of the Detroit Public Schools. And here is what's needed in order to put together the best educational system in the process, and in that to support families so that there is housing, so families don't have to move from place to place all the time. I mean, I know of several people that have been displaced out of their homes. They didn't own the home. They never could afford to own a home. And so what are they doing? They're paying more. They're living in hotels, these little flea bag hotels at hundreds of dollars a week, with no, in long waiting list of being able to find decent housing. If you don't have a place to live, then, you can't thrive. So, we need to have, all that debt that they're making Detroit pay, which they shouldn't have paid in the first place, as it relates to Detroit Public Schools, that's gone. And what are we going to do now? We're going to put resources into families, and because the emotional fragility of Black families, having been subjected to not just the kind of racism that we've seen that has been disproportionately affected us as it relates to police over policing and over incarceration, taking away generations of people, and then refusing to spend money on education, is all of that. And then, when we have the foundation of a community, then then entrepreneurs can provide the resources that are needed to support that community, and that it can be self-sufficient. I would also, there's so many things I would do. You don't want to ask me that question, because I drive through these neighborhoods, and they're the people that are coming in, that are renovating and restoring, but they're people that have been there all along that don't have, so we should help them, through low or no interest loan programs to renovate and upgrade their houses, so that they're not forced to leave when the taxes go up by another developer, and then, you know, they're displaced. I mean, there's a lot of displacement going on here. So, you know, and last but not least, I haven't even touched on most of it, but on all these issues that we're talking about, they all boil down to the fact that we need to have a real integration of what it's like to be human in terms of, you know, financial support, housing and housing, education, and you know, really mental health. I mean, all these issues are things that affect our communities and urban communities disproportionately. And until this last movement, and again, I start out by telling you how proud I am of these young people that are stepping out there every day. But until this occurred, you know, there were people that were just blind to the conditions that people have to deal with every day. And, you know, as a Black person in America, you know, we suffer affronts that people have no idea. You know, I remember going into a department store, and in the shoe department, you know, you're looking in Grosse Pointe, and you know, looking at shoes, and you know, you know, people that know me, you know that, you know, I'm not a slouch, you know, in terms of my appearance. I could, you know, so I come into the place, and the woman immediately grabs her bag as if I'm going to snatch it. You know, so this occurred, you know, when I was in my 30s. I still remember it. You know, and we have these little affronts every day to our humanity, which is really important to remember, because it does affect our ability to be able to persevere and go forward when there's things that we have to do for ourselves. So I just think that there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm very, you know, and if people are willing to do the work, I think we can achieve it. And this is, at this particular point in time, I'm very, very hopeful, because I see that we're at a perfect storm, if you will. The pandemic, the economic situation that it has resulted from that, the whole issue of police brutality, and the underlying circumstances that make African Americans in particular very, and brown people, very susceptible to the pandemic because of all the other things. You know, the housing, the education, the ability. I mean, if you're living in a house, if you have one with 7 or 8 people in small quarters, you can't self-distance. And that's, you know, that is really one of the reasons why, you know, but what are the reasons, you know, that we have all the other conditions? So, you know, I would be addressing health and human services. I think every child should have a mentor. Every business should have a mentor. In order to, you know, and, you know, the whole premise of the US and the capitalistic system is competition. However, you know, I believe in the bigger pie. I don't believe that I have to, as a matter of fact, that was also one of the things that I was taught. You know, it's based on the McDonald's principle that, you know, you notice if you go see a McDonald's, there's always a Burger King, a Pizza Hut, you know, churches, etc., all in the same area. Why is that? Why is that? Because, you know, because competition doesn't hurt you. It actually helps you be able to grow. And so, you know, we have to be in a situation where we are able to compete, because so often people just keep us from competing based on our color or our gender. And everybody should have the opportunity to be able to do that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. One question that we wrap up, we had several dozen, as I know you're aware of, but we're rushing up against the clock. And on a fun note, right? What is your superpower, Sharon? Or what is your spirit animal?
Oh my gosh. Well, I saw that when I said, oh my gosh, I need to ask somebody. I need to phone a friend. Superpower. Well, I believe that my superpower is the ability to be able to maintain optimism and persevere regardless of what's going on around me. I'm a really good person. I'm really good in a crisis because I can see beyond it. And but I'm also, I was born in August, and so I'm a Leo. I'm a lioness, and lions fight for their cubs and support their and go out looking and hunting and and are able to provide. So so I guess so those I guess are my that would be my answer. I don't think those are good answers, but I have to work on
that. They're great. They're your answers. Yeah. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. This was amazing. I love doing these interviews week after week, but this was especially impactful and powerful. And I know I didn't talk as much this time, but man, I took it all in, and I learned a lot, and I hope our audience has really learned a lot. It's one of those where this is one I need to rewatch and take it all in again. So we appreciate you so much for taking the time. We know you're busy to do this with us and share with us and our audience about all of this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really was excited about it, and I really appreciate the invitation. This is a real special time, and we sometimes have to meditate on it, and let the answers flow to us instead of us trying to come up with the answers.
Excellent. Thank you again. Thank you to our audience. We're gonna stop the live stream, but we will be back next week and talking more. Feel free to comment or ask questions if you're watching the replay at any point. And if we need to direct them to Sharon, we will.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much.